unfortunately, I don't think in the near future we're going to completely be a society without homelessness. But you can reach functional zero in the sense that you can make homelessness rare, brief, and temporary.
That's Councilmember Andrew J. Lewis expounding on that magic phrase, functional zero homelessness, in the Seattle downtown core. That's the goal of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority in 2023. But is that a reality? Also, what does the push to add more housing options in Seattle mean for your neighborhood as the city works to update its comprehensive plan? And when are you going to see a new permanent Sidewalk cafe around the corner after a change this week to the city's permit system? So much to consider this week here on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm a host on Seattle Channel, and the views expressed here are mine, all mine. My co-host is Kevin Schofield. He is a weekly writer for the South Seattle Emerald. Danger is his middle name. And Kevin, I got to say, you had a recent tweet about the relationship between eating ultra-processed foods and cognitive decline. Very interesting piece. But I just wanted to know, can I work out a deal where I can eat an average of one hot dog per week during the Mariners season next year? Because I feel like I need those nitrates, man. What do you think?
For you, anything. And I'm going to have to cut back on my Twinkies, but it might be worth it.
All in moderation. All in moderation. Thank you, Kevin, as always, for joining me. Thanks to City Grind Espresso, our background noise sponsor for the audio podcast. Visit John on the first floor of City Hall and tell him Seattle News, Views, and Brews sent you. If you are listening, please become a patron. We have a great holiday gift for you. Pledge at the $10 level, and you get your very own special Seattle News, Views, and Brews mug sent to you. We'll feature you as our mugshot of the show. Only a few weeks left to order these before they go away, folks, at the end of the year. So this week's mugshot, Kevin, thank you for drinking out of that one right there. But this week's mugshot is from our good friend, intern Rob, a classic here. He sent along a holiday greeting card to Kevin. Rob, I love this one. I had to run it again. You're the man. Thank you for your above and beyond support. And heads up, folks, here's a note from Converge Media. The Washington State Homeowner Assistance Fund, the HAF, is ready to help you out. Let's say you've fallen behind on your house payments because of something related to COVID. The HAF has you covered here. If you qualify, you get up to $60,000 with this deal. So reach out to their counselors. They're ready to help you get through the holidays. Give that hotline a call, 877-894-4663, or visit WashingtonHAF.org. Okay, then, it's time for Right Here, Right Now. We are going to start this week with something that looked like it was on the agenda, and then it was pulled. A report on the city's HOPE team, the acronym there, Homeless Outreach and Provider Ecosystem, in case you forgot. This is the city team that shows up during the cleanup or sweep of an unauthorized encampment. Why was this pulled from the Homelessness Committee agenda? Not entirely sure about that, but I pulled down this report, Kevin, and I wanted to talk about it because the data here paints a bit of a disjointed picture. What do you make of this report?
Yeah, well, the data is super interesting on one hand. On the other hand, their data is still really bad.
Yeah.
Right? The King County.
When you say bad, what does that mean?
It's very incomplete. It's very inaccurate. So, for example, they list in this report a bunch of data about how the HOPE team and the King County Regional Homeless Authority are doing in terms of making referrals to shelter for people living unsheltered in our city and getting into those shelters. And they said that the HOPE team in the third quarter of this year made 614 referrals to shelter, of which 250 of them actually enrolled in the shelter within 48 hours. But they say, we don't actually know if that number is real. It could be actually a bit higher than that because we don't have good data as far as tracking and good systems in place for tracking who we give referrals to and whether they actually end up in those shelters. So there could be more, but they didn't manage to track 250, which seems pretty low. And the both these teams toss around the number of referrals they get a lot. It's like here's the best metric for the amount of work that we're doing, but a pretty low number are actually getting into those shelters. So what does that mean for shelter capacity? What does that mean for how people who are living homeless right now are viewing the shelters that we have? Right? Is this something that they're actually? Are we giving them something that's of value to them, or not? Right?
So that they're actually going to take.
Yeah. So the data they're getting, the HMIS, Homeless Management Information System information they're getting in general is just bad, right? They've still, for privacy reasons, they've made it optional for people to actually provide information before they get into shelters. So they don't really know like who is showing up in the shelters, who who does that repeatedly, and so it's very hard for them to track people. It's very and part of that again is by design to respect privacy for the people who want that,
Sure.
and not let that be a barrier to the people who they want to get into these kinds of shelters and get into other kinds of services. But it just makes tracking how well these systems are doing very, very hard.
Yeah, and I in looking at this, Kevin, the other piece to it as well, I think about all these different service agencies that the KCRHA contracts with to do this work out on the streets there. They're going to be looking at those contracts next year and saying, okay, do we renew this one? Do we put this one on hold, et cetera? And I thought it was very interesting in this report on the HOPE team, this idea that entries in the HIMS reflect a very small portion of this overall work of homelessness. The KCRHA is planning to look at some different data reporting requirements when these outreach contracts are rebid. And that's a big, big piece of this, I think.
Yeah, and historically, those outreach providers and other nonprofits have resisted doing more reporting.
Right.
Again, they don't want to be collecting a ton of information. They also don't want to be having their own staff, and they are all struggling like every other organization around here to hire people, having their staff tied up, spending all the time doing paperwork as opposed to actually helping people. So there's been a lot of resistance to doing more reporting. So will the data get better? Will we have a better view as to how well the system is doing? It's really hard to say if that's going to get any better in the next year.
Yeah, I know that was a big emphasis for Mark Dones, but just really quickly back on the HOPE team here, we had talked about this a little bit last week and the week before when it comes to the Seattle City Council budget there. So the mayor initially was wanting this HOPE team to kind of get pushed over into this unified care team that he had talked about and wanted some more funding to go into that. That didn't really happen. Can we touch on that one last time, just looking at the HOPE team and the future of it and where it's going?
Yeah, so another controversy around all this is this question of who does outreach. And before there was the HOPE team, before there was a HOPE team, there was a navigation team, and a bunch of the outreach providers in the city said, we don't want to be the outreach on the day that on site when a sweep is happening, when an encampment is being removed, because that will color the relationship that we have with people that we're trying to help, and it'll make them trust us less. So the city actually basically created their own outreach positions, what they call system navigators, in the HOPE team to be able to do that day of outreach. Now, what the city council just did in response to Mayor Harrell saying, hey, I want to turn the HOPE team into this unified care team. I wanted to have a regional approach, so different areas of the city have their own mini team. We're not playing off one area of the city against each other. Everybody gets support for dealing with homeless encampments. The mayor said, I want to have some more outreach people so that we can have dedicated ones for different areas of the city. City council said, nah, we don't want to do that, right? We don't want to be sort of scaling up our own outreach more. This is why we have the King County Regional Homeless Authority. So they took that money out of the mayor's proposed unified care team budget and moved it over into the money that's going to fund from the city going to fund the King County Regional Homeless Authority. But it's not clear, based upon what they said in the past, that the Regional Homeless Authority is going to want to provide this day of outreach either, right? So at the end of the day, did the city council just undermine this whole new unified care team by doing this? By making sure that there's nobody there on site to actually provide outreach when an encampment's being removed?
That's a big, big question. And it brings us to the next topic that I wanted to cover with you, Kevin, which is this idea of zero functional homelessness in downtown Seattle by the year 2023. A lot of ink spilled on this topic as we get into December and closer to the new year. I also recently talked with Mark Dones about this, the CEO of the Regional Homelessness Authority. I talked to them on City Inside Out on Seattle Channel, as well as Councilmember Lewis on Council Edition. Functional zero, I know, is a little bit of a convoluted term, folks, but the basic idea is fewer people are entering homelessness than exiting it, and that enough resources are in place to get people off the street. So I'm just going to put that on the side for a while because there's a much bigger explanation for that. But Kevin, this overall goal of functional zero homelessness downtown, I know the RHA is working on this very hard. They have this partnership for zero where philanthropists are coming in too to try to work on this. Is this goal within reach in 2023?
Is it within reach in 2023? No, absolutely it's not. Right. So we still have 787 people living on shelter in the city core. There is no plan in 2023 to bring on enough new permanent supportive housing and shelter capacity to get another 787 people off the street. And we're not moving people out of shelters and tiny home villages fast enough to create enough capacity to get off. So is that going to happen? No. But, I think the larger point of what this is leading to is saying, that the King County Regional Homeless Authority is trying to move, and the city of Seattle and King County as a whole, trying to move from a system that was largely measured by how much money was being spent on various things to a system with an actual plan to reach a specific outcome, right? If we've got 787 people living on shelter in the city core, what's it going to take to get them off the streets? What are the resources that we need? Are we actually taking the money that's being allocated towards homelessness and creating those resources that are needed to deliver on that part, and then ring fencing them so that those resources can't be pulled off to other sources? We know, okay, this year we're going to get 787 people living, unsheltered in the city core, out of the city core. We've got the shelter space. We've got the outreach workers. We've got transportation for them. We've got storage for the belongings. We've got everything we need so we can go be successful and do that. There's never been that kind of focused plan where they say, here are all the resources we need. We just every year say, okay, well, we have this much of outreach. Let's up that a little bit more. We got this much shelter. Let's up that a little bit more. Right. So again, it's been measured by how much money are we spending and not by what is the plan that we need to have and how do we resource everything that we need so we can be successful with that plan. So
and in looking at that,
go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say with the RHA, and I think this is the path you're about to go down, they have established or in the process of establishing this system, but I don't even know if that system can be fully fleshed out and established by the year 2023. Kind of what you're talking about where you put the system first and then you fund it rather than the funding and figure out the system.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a vicious circle for them, or hopefully a virtuous cycle for them, right? So, and a lot of that is around credibility, right? Are we spending enough right now to solve homelessness? No, we're not. We have 13,000, almost 14,000, maybe more homeless people in King County. Do we have enough resources to get them all off the street and into shelter or into housing? No, we actually don't. But they've been so ineffective with a lot of the resources and money they've been given so far that they've really hurt their own credibility. So how do they build back that credibility? Right? If they go ask for more money right now for all the resources they need to go be successful on getting 13,000 people off the street, they're not going to get it. Right? So do they start smaller? Do they say, okay, we're going to have a plan for the 787 in the city core and watch over the next 2 years as we're really successful on that part. And that will give us more credibility. Then we can come back and say, okay, look, we've proven we can have a plan and go be successful at it. Now give us more money and we'll do that with more segments of the homeless population. We'll do that with the vets. We'll do that with the Native Americans. We'll do that with youth and young adults, right? Where we know that there are these specific segments with specific unique needs. We can build a plan for what they need and then go execute on that plan because we just shown that we know how to build a plan and go execute on it.
And I will say, Mark Dones told me in the interview that he did with me on City Inside Out, they're bullish on this idea of making this happen, at least downtown in 2023. We'll have to see how that plays out, of course, but this is it's a big conversation to have. Yeah.
If they could, it would be great, right? Again, it would give them more credibility. That is, by most measures, the most high-profile area where homelessness has gotten out of control.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's causing public safety issues and public health issues. And so if they it's a 2-for if not a 3-for if they do that, right? They help a bunch of people who are living homeless. They improve a bunch of public safety issues. They improve a bunch of public health issues in the city. They make downtown a place that people feel safer and want to go back to. Restaurants can open back up. Employees can go back and start working downtown again. So, it's a big win all around. There's lots of good reason to choose that as the first one to do. But again, they need a plan. You need to make sure they allocate and ring fence the resources to do it, and then they need to go execute well.
Yeah, so much going on with that. Thank you for that, Kevin. All right, well, up next, a phrase that strikes terror in the hearts of some and may induce drowsiness in others. We're talking about the comprehensive plan, getting an update from the Seattle City Council. How's that going to affect your neighborhood? Stick around. We're talking about it on Now Hear This. Okay, do you like land use committee meetings? Of course you do. That's why you listen to this podcast. We love them too. So last week, the committee was hard at work talking about the 2024 update to the comprehensive plan. This is the plan that considers the density, the amount of homes Seattle can put in each neighborhood. It's important because we have a lack of affordable housing, as you know, and the city has grown twice as fast as anticipated in the prior comprehensive plan. Bottom line, there's a push to add more density here. Councilmember Teresa Mosqueda bristled at the idea that building heights would be limited in some residential areas to 30 feet to preserve the, quote, character of the neighborhood. Here's what she said about that.
And so I'm really concerned if what we're talking about is limiting what could be considered as a future design if we're looking at character within existing neighborhoods that were explicitly designed to exclude people from living in there and to exclude density and diversity in terms of housing types and people.
Kevin, we have talked about this plan before. How is this discussion shaping up? Where are we headed with the comprehensive plan?
Right. So it's important to understand where we are at what stage we're at in this process, right?
Yes.
This is a very long process. It's going to end up with a major update to the comprehensive plan in 2024. Which notably is after the next city council election. So
correct.
So the people who are sitting on the city council right now are not necessarily the people who are going to be voting up or down on this new comprehensive plan update. Right. So where they are right now is what's called the environmental impact statement. Any changes, because this is expected to be major updates, any changes that are going to have an effect on livability in the city need to be studied first under state law. So what the city is doing right now is the Office of Planning and Community Development has written out a draft scoping document which says these are the changes that we're going to look at. And for a lot of the sort of the zoning changes and where's housing going to go, they've got in the first draft they did right now, they've got 5 options. They've got one which is no change, which is legally required. They have to. Yes. Even if nobody wants the no change option, legally they're required to go study what that would look like because there's still going to be changes. People are still going to move here. Buildings are going to fall down, need to get replaced, and all that stuff. So like how many new housing units do we think are going to get built, even if we don't make any changes to zoning? Right. This is a good baseline. It's important to understand that. Then they got 4 other options for how aggressively to change zoning to allow control where new housing goes in the city, right? Should we make, minor increases in our urban village areas? Should we make larger increases there and maybe some increases in what they call the 15-minute transit corridor or 10-minute transit corridors? Or do we more aggressively want to look at residential zoning, what we classically call single-family residential zoning across the city and say, hey, let's upzone that to allow more housing there. The most aggressive option they have is actually sort of a combination of those. It says, let's increase density in urban villages, let's increase density in the 10-minute transit corridors, and in all residential neighborhoods in the city, let's allow for up to 4plexes.
Right, and that's really what Councilmember Mosqueda was pushing for, these ideas of maybe a 6plex or something like that in different areas. And I should point out, the Seattle City Council over the past couple months here has eliminated this term single-family zoning. You won't find it. It's not used anymore. But this is the next step here, basically trying to see what does that really mean when you eliminate a phrase like that. What does that mean when it comes to the comprehensive plan?
It's definitely marketing. It's definitely marketing. They didn't change the zoning at all. They didn't change any rules about zoning. They just changed the name so that it's, it doesn't say single, it doesn't emphasize single family anymore. And it was a setup to do exactly what they wanted. And I'm not saying that pejoratively. It was a marketing effort to set up for exactly the conversation they're having right now. And so what the urbanists and other progressive organizations in the city are arguing for, that Councilmember Mosqueda has come out as the loudest champion for, is to say, look, apart from these 5 alternatives that are already in this EIS scoping document, we want one more. We want an alternative 6, which says let's allow for up to 6plexes, even more density in all residential zones. And as we go through that, raise the maximum building height from 30 feet to something higher, because that will also, you probably have to do that to allow for sixplexes. They're arguing for going even more aggressively towards this. And there's some good reasons to do that, because, a lot of the zoning, and it's not like there's never been, a time where the zoning in the city allowed for, more density. In fact, we see a lot of legacy buildings in a lot of residential neighborhoods that have more housing more denser housing than that. And that was pre kind of mid 20th century zoning changes that were made that were tied to redlining, that were tied to racist efforts to stop people of color moving into mostly white neighborhoods, or entirely white neighborhoods in a lot of cases around the city, right? So there's a racist history to a lot of the zoning. And there are people today that are, they're saying, well, we want to preserve the unique neighborhood character of some of these single-family neighborhoods. And there are other folks who read that as, well, that's kind of a dog whistle for, let's continue on and make sure that, we don't change the ethnic makeup of these neighborhoods.
Yeah, and I just wanted to jump in with one point here, because Portland, our neighbor to the south there, has recently put some votes together. It was actually earlier this year to increase middle housing, as it's called, these fourplexes, duplexes, etc. But from a lot of the reports I've seen, there hasn't been a big explosion of these multiplexes there. I mean, I guess what I've seen is that these projects have to be practical. They have to be economical for builders. There's some other hurdles they have to go through. It's just not a simple equation here, I guess, if the council were able to pass something like this Alternative 6.
They have to get funding. They have to buy the land to go, make these projects happen. They have to go through the whole design review process or administrative review with the city. There's a lot that has to happen. So none of these are like, when you pass a change like this, it doesn't mean like immediately all the projects you're going to see overnight, sort of all this denser housing. It is going to take probably generations, right? Because nobody is forced to sell their property to allow for
That's right. Right.
So it takes a long time. It's interesting that we're also seeing the state level. This isn't just a local zoning, right? There are states now that are forcing changes in zoning across the entire state to disallow, single family zoning.
Yeah, right? Oregon's one of them.
Oregon is one of them, right? So, which is one of the reasons Portland, Portland was, is the largest, metropolitan center, in population center in the state, and they were largely one of the ones who most strongly argued for this kind of zoning change statewide to get them out of, the advantage to them was to get them out of a local battle. Right. Trying to fight their own, local voters on this, right? Places like Eugene, Oregon had the same sort of thing. Well, we'll see what happens in Washington State, whether this is a move they ever make here.
Yeah, I know there's been talk about it at the state legislature level, so we'll see what happens with that this year. I wanted to briefly touch on another neighborhood issue with you, Kevin. It looks like those street and sidewalk business permits that council has wanted to make permanent. It's happening in the Transportation Committee this week. This was something where these permits were handed out for free to a lot of these businesses to help them through the pandemic. How's this going to work, making these things permanent, Kevin? What do you think?
Well, it's not going to be free, but it's going
not
to
anymore,
be
right?
really, it's going to be really cheap. Like none of these getting one of these permits isn't going to break the bank, and that might end up being controversial in its own, because they're essentially that sidewalk space is in a lot of cases is really great space. And,
it's valuable.
It's valuable real estate. They're basically giving permits to it for very low prices, like $500 a year or less to businesses to use. But, it's great for businesses. And certainly we're at the point in the city of the economic recovery where that's still going to be important for businesses. Particularly we want, restaurants. And there's a lot of places in the city where restaurants are still struggling to come back from the pandemic, where, it's not time to start pulling back on, restaurants don't need, and retail, businesses don't need help anymore.
Baloney.
They sure do. So the fees are pretty modest. The way that this seems to be structured by the council is that rather than have the city council legislate, here's exactly how the permit program is going to work, they're giving an enormous amount of flexibility to SDOT, to the Seattle Department of Transportation, to issue the permits, to set their own what they call director's rule for how to manage these permits, how many to what the rules are for the permits. So this is a case where the city council is not taking a heavy hand on it, saying, here's exactly how this program is going to work. It's like, we want this program, we're going to legislate this program is okay, and we're going to let SDOT write all the rules for it.
Yeah, and their new director there, and Greg Spott's taking this over.
Yep.
Thank you for breaking that piece down with me, Kevin. All right, coming up, how do you prosecute a former president? You never really think you're going to have to ask that question, but we live in strange times here. And Kevin has looked into this topic. He wrote about it in the South Seattle Emerald. It's our podcast gem of the week. Kevin, you wrote recently in the South Seattle Emerald the possibility of prosecuting former President Trump, who's also running for office again. Some attorneys have already put out a memo on this as the Department of Justice is considering its options here. What was this memo all about?
Yeah, so a bunch of high-powered attorneys who, a couple of them formerly worked for the DOJ or, as defense attorneys, but they're all in private practice right now or retired, wrote basically a draft of what they know the Department of Justice is almost certainly writing internally right now, which is what they call a prosecution memo or a pros memo, which says when the DOJ is getting ready to file charges, they write this memo that lays out this whole, here are the facts that we have, here's the law related to this, here's how we would apply the, the facts we see to the law, here's, possible defenses that there might be, and then kind of, so what's our recommendation about the charges that should be filed on this? So based upon all the public information that's come out around these various things related to January 6th and related to, keeping documents at Mar-a-Lago, laying out, okay, publicly here are the facts that we know, here are the laws, here's how it applies. And, in the end, they concluded, we think that there's a strong case for filing charges against former President Trump related to both January 6th and the Mar-a-Lago incident, number of incidents there.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting to say, these attorneys don't have the full set of information that the DOJ has and the FBI has, right? Which, can cut a couple different ways here, right? The DOJ probably has even stronger evidence and testimony that Trump committed crimes.
Yeah.
But they may also have evidence, what they call exculpatory evidence, that shows that maybe, at least in the way the laws are written, maybe you'd have a strong defense against some of these, right?
Okay.
Or, some of, evidence showing that some of the folks who've testified aren't credible and that wouldn't stand up in court, right? So there may be some evidence that they have that makes a stronger case, and maybe evidence that says, we would never be able to actually prove that particular charge in court. But at the end of the day, they looked at like 6 different laws and said, there's some strong cases to be made here that Trump has committed multiple felonies.
It's fascinating, and it's one of those headlines that isn't going to go away. But we need to get rolling here, Kevin. I got to get out of here. But I needed to make sure I checked in with you about Mariners free agents. So much happening right now at the M's, even though we're in the middle of wintertime. So the M's just landed this former All-Star second baseman Colton Wong from the Brewers.
Yep.
So does that mean bye-bye to Adam Frazier? He is a free agent this year. He was their second baseman last year. Does he play outfield? Do they want him back? Some quick thoughts on this one in the hot stove version of SNV and VB here. Yeah,
Colton Wong was a good pickup. He's a strong hitter. He's he hits for power, right? So he's going to hit some home runs.
Like that.
He had a bit of an off year on the defensive side this past year. Yep. But nothing that he can't, rebound from, and be playing with, a very strong, defensive team in the Seattle Mariners. So that would be a really good thing. Frazier can play a couple different positions. So he may decide to stick around. He may not. We'll see what happens. There's a couple positions the Mariners need to fill. They could use another really strong corner outfielder.
Yeah.
They could use another really strong starting pitcher.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If they fill those two, they're looking great. Yeah, but you can see a lot of Colton Wong is going to be a free agent a year from now. You can see the moves that the Mariners are making right now. They're gunning to win in 2023.
Yeah.
They're now once again in a position where, like at AAA, they're pretty thin.
Yeah.
Not a lot of talent left at AAA. There's some more lower down the organization.
Yeah.
But, there's not a lot they can draw on because, Julio's come up in this past year. A whole bunch of other folks, really star guys they had at AAA, they pulled up to the majors. And, some of them doing pretty well. But they're, to finish off these holes, they're going to have to go outside because they just don't have the talent ready to go at AAA right now.
This is great stuff. Kevin, thank you, as always, for joining me here. Thanks to everybody listening to Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics and sometimes baseball, too. The podcast is on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen. Please find Seattle News, Views, and Brews on Patreon. Need your support here. Show your support if you could. Thanks also for watching on Converge Media, too. See you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2022.